So welcome to the webinar. We're going to start today with a bit of an introduction and an overview of the agenda for the session. The first thing we're going to do is going to get into a little bit of information about INM, just so you know who we are and why we're presenting this topic today. Then we're going to look at Adobe AIR. So in looking at Adobe AIR, we're going to talk a little bit about rich internet applications, or RIAs. And I see from the questions that you answered when you registered for this session that quite a few of you are already familiar with this technology. So we'll go over it just as a review, and just to tie it into AIR, and so you can understand the role of AIR in conjunction with rich internet applications. We are then going to look at some of the opportunities introduced with AIR and some of the key benefits and examples, as well as the factors that you'll want to consider in developing with AIR. And we'll also look at some alternative solutions, so things that may not necessarily be competitive to AIR, but maybe things that you see presented in the same type of solution as AIR. So we'll look at some of those technologies, and then we'll look at how to move forward with your AIR project. And so we'll start with a little bit of an introduction to about INM. INM, or Integration New Media, has been around since 1989, so nearly 20 years now, and during that time we've helped companies create rich user experiences, both online and offline. We work directly with clients as well as with agencies that have some needs for their clients. And essentially the main offering that we provide these days is top-level interactive project consulting. So we work with companies either doing development or consulting on projects, but we also do offer a number of what I would call productized services, so solutions that can be customized to meet your client's needs. And we also have a set of developer tools for Director and, well, a few things that we have for authorware that are a little bit older, but we have those as well. So we're presenting on AIR today simply because when we look at rich internet applications, AIR provides a really great opportunity for companies to expand what they're doing on RIAs. And we've had a number of clients who've looked to create a desktop type experience. So we are working with companies to build solutions that are online and offline with AIR. So that's the context as to why we're presenting this today. So what is AIR? Now you've heard this acronym and you've heard about the Adobe Integrated Runtime. But what I wanted to do is to get into a bit of an explanation that moves beyond the technical explanation that Adobe has provided. So when you hear from Adobe, what they say is that AIR is a cross-OS application engine that enables hybrid desktop internet applications. So essentially the way that they're pitching this is it allows you to take the capabilities of a Flex application on the web or an HTML application on the web and package it so that it's available on the desktop. But what does this really mean when we get into AIR? This means that with this technology you can now port a rich web experience back to the desktop. So if you've got a rich internet application, and we'll talk a little bit more about what those are in a few moments, and if you've got one of those already, you can actually bring that back to the desktop. It means that you can develop rich internet applications that work when users are online as well as when they're not. That's one of the challenges of RIAs today, is there's always a need for a connection. Well, with AIR, you're able to develop solutions that don't necessarily require that. You can also create applications that interact with the desktop. And you can create applications that extend your brand to become a part of your client's desktop. So as we'll see in some of the examples, there's a small footprint that you can create that sits on the user's desktop with your branding that launches your application or your experience. And what's really great is you can develop truly cross-platform applications from the tools you already use today. Previous to AIR, if you wanted to develop for the desktop, it often meant learning a completely separate set of technology as well as a separate set of tools in order to do that development. So you would have two different development paths, something for the web and something for the desktop. Now with AIR, you can maximize the economies of scale and have one team work on the concept and one team work on the implementation and then deploy it across all those different channels. So when we're looking at AIR, we're going to dive into the ABCs of AIR. So well, actually it's more like A through E's of AIR because there's a few extra bonus points there. But A with AIR stands for an application that's always there, anywhere. So it's something that you can use on the web, you can use on the desktop, and there's some continuity of that data and that experience between the two. It's a fully branded experience, so unlike a desktop application that you have today where you may use a standard Windows installer, this is something that you can create a very custom look and feel for, and some of the examples that we're going to see really showcase this quite nicely. It provides convenient desktop functionality, so things we've talked about access to files, cut and paste, the same things you do in Word almost, you could do through these AIR applications if you choose to enable those features. Access to data, which has always been a challenge with applications that run on the internet, is that if you wanted to access items like photos or images or videos that you have on your desktop, you have to go through that lengthy upload or download process in order to exchange data. Now with AIR you have that access to data on the desktop, so you can interact with that without necessarily doing that upload. Also efficient development and delivery. That's the key, as we were speaking before about develop once, deploy many times across different channels. That's the efficiency that comes with AIR. So in order to see where AIR fits into the grand scheme of things, it's really important that we look at rich internet applications so that there's a bit of an understanding about what these are and the role that AIR plays with them. Now, I see from the registrations that many of you have already had some experience with rich internet applications, so this may be a bit of a refresher for you, but certainly it's just a couple of slides, so we won't spend too much time on that. And for those, if I go a little bit too quickly on this, we do have some great resources on rich internet applications I'm going to refer to at the end of the presentation. So if you want to take some time yourself to dive into this a little deeper, you're going to have some resources to do that. So when we look at rich internet applications, we're going to look a little bit about the history of applications. So when applications were developed for computers, what really started to happen was they were mostly mainframe applications. So they were very text-based interfaces available to a local audience on a mainframe. There wasn't really anything rich about the experience. Then as the need for applications to be shared with different users and to have a little bit more functionality emerged, the birth of the rich desktop application really came to be. So what this meant is that there was a client-server model, so there was some information on the server, some on the client, and the content had the ability to be a bit richer and more image-driven. And it was very highly functional, but very limited connectivity, is that everybody who used the application had to have a copy. Then when you jumped into the web and the global reach of the web, the experience was pared down in order to ensure the reach of the application. So the application became very text-based, very practical in terms of content. However, it had a great reach, so people compromised significantly. Where we've developed and established now is in the rich internet world, in rich internet application world, where you have that same experience that you had on the desktop being ported to the web. So you have the best of both worlds. You have applications that really are embracing the features and functionality of the traditional desktop, but they also have the connectivity of the internet. So they're freely available for everyone to use, but they have that rich experience that users are expecting. The other thing that's quite unique and original with a rich internet application is the way that they handle data. They're much more effective in managing and processing data. So if we look at this particular example, we have an HTML website, so you have an action that's being taken. So for example, if a user comes to a website and starts to fill out an HTML form, they may check a box on that form and at the end of the process hit the submit button. What happens is, in this particular situation with an HTML site, is that the call gets sent to the server, and the server then says, oh, okay, check box A, and it refreshes the browser and then updates that form. So what with a rich internet application, the the data is exchanged in an asynchronous way. So what this means is that when you take an action on a form, immediately that information can be updated locally on that form. So you don't have to go through a browser refresh every single time. So it's much more effective in terms of processing data, as well as it's a much faster response time as well. So with rich internet applications, what this means is that you can have a lot of really immersive content and rich visual elements. You can have really large quantities of data that would be incredibly challenging to process in an HTML environment. And they're easy and fast to develop and deploy, as well as maintain, because you can keep your application up to date all the time since it's available over the web. They provide great data collection and access to shared data. So there's a lot of great functionalities for rich internet applications. So now that we've seen a little bit about RIAs, I just want to take a second and do a polling question to see where you are in terms of rich internet application projects. If you could just take a second and answer one of these responses to the question, are you currently working on a rich internet application project? Just to get a sense as to the interest everybody has today. Okay, great. So we have a good mix of currently working on and planning to work on soon, and a few that maybe, I guess, maybe a little bit new to RIA. So this is a bit of an intro for you. So that's great. Okay. So it seems like we've got pretty much everyone.